Hey everybody, my name's George. I am an addict.
Hey George.
When I'm trying to be cute, I'll say I'm an addict and my problem is George. My friend Scott C. used to always say that and always impressed me. But I'm very grateful to be in this meeting at this convention. Give you a little background on me, and I used somewhere around 22, 23 years. I don't know when the first time I picked up a swallow of beer or whatever, but first time I smoked a joint, I was about 14. I picked up my last white chip at 36 years old. So I've been to jail in the state of Georgia 35 times. I've been to long-term treatment twice. Last time I was in treatment, I was there for 23 months and a week. And I've been clean since I left that program. Been to detox twice. Never been to a psych ward, but it was because I'd never tell them I was crazy. I was afraid if they ever said I was crazy, I'd never be able to convince them otherwise. But anyway, my drug of choice was yours and more, and I liked it strong and regular. Okay, and I, just when we're outside of this workshop at some point, if you really want to know, just understand I would do whatever it took to get one more. My parents, my family, my children, my grandchildren, my neighborhood is safer today because I'm hanging out with y'all tonight. Believe that. Just to touch, I'm real honored to be doing this workshop. I really wasn't supposed to be sitting up here, but it just kind of worked out, and I think they both just figured this out last week. But John is actually my sponsor and has been for over 13 years, and Jeff is our grand sponsor, or his sponsor, and my grand sponsor. And so fast forward a little bit, I quit using in 2003. Went through this treatment program. I got out of treatment. I went to meetings 6-7 days a week after I got out of treatment for another couple of years because I felt like I was strung out if I wasn't in a meeting at 8 o'clock because I'd been doing it for 2 years now. And I felt like I was supposed to be in a meeting 7 days a week. And so by the time, I finally relaxed a little bit and actually started dating and stuff like that, I had a little over 4 years clean. And through this process, I've been fortunate enough to start my own business. I got contracting license in the state of Georgia now, and took the test, passed the test. Struggled because me being the self-righteous ass that I am, I think I know better than everybody else in all things. Yes, in running a business as well. And we struggled with that somewhat. And the business was doing okay, fairly well. The last time that the Georgia Regional Convention met at this facility, I was in a coma down there in Gwinnett Medical. I fell off an 8-foot ladder, broke my pelvis, 5 ribs, collarbone. The body goes into shock when it happens all at one time like that. And if you would have ever told me up to that point, through all the shit I've been through in my life, all them trips to jail, all the fist fights around the pisser in the jailhouse, all the, cars I've totaled out, all the stupid shit, the times I've been busted in the back of the head, all them things, if you'd have told me all that would have happened, I was falling off an 8-foot ladder, I'd have laughed at you. But I caught a staph infection, almost died. And, I'm going to tell this on you. My mom and dad live in South Georgia, and I'm blessed to still have them alive. And my wife now was fiance then. She drives a school bus for Forsyth County. And my mom's sister, who I was living with at the time in Dawsonville, she works a full-time job, still does at 76 years old. I strive to be like that woman. But during the day, many times I'd come to in the hospital after they brought me back out of the coma, and the family would not be there. And from time to time, I'd wake up and Jeff would be standing over there. And, you know, and he'd always be reading some scripture. You know, and then after I finally, they let me out of the hospital and started getting better, and I started going over this shit. And you know, I never could figure out if he was trying to fucking lead me to Jesus Christ or if he was reading me my last rites. You know what I mean? And but all right, that's my best ditch attempt at some humor. But that is a true story. It was meant to be laughed at, but it wasn't real damn funny when I was going through it. And so anyway, in that process, you know, I came to, when they brought me out of the coma, and I actually remember having some consciousness after being out of this world for 45, 46 days. And, you know, they'd had me on that shit they put you on and that shit these kids are killing themselves with. Well, anyway, I wake up and, you know, and I got a drip in my arm. And the first thing I did was like, all right. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I can't do this shit. And I ripped it out. Well, then it took 4 or 5 hours to convince them that I wasn't going to be a danger to myself anymore. So they finally untied me again. But, you know, and you can, for any of those that really know me, you know, I get a couple of cups of Starbucks in me, you can't shut me the fuck up. Well, I had a trach in too, so I couldn't talk, so it's like, you know, it's like, anyway. But I remember, you know, them taking me off of that medication, and they put me straight into some lower grade, you know, medication. And about the 4th, 5th, 6th day, whatever it was, they were rolling me out to go do my dialysis or whatever, because my kidneys had shut down. And I looked down the hallway, you know, and it was like the fucking Rolling Stones song, you know, painted black. It was like there was all this crowd all the way down the hallway, and I looked down the hallway and I saw, no shit, Rob Zombie with orange fucking hair. And I looked up and I said, hey dude, you know, and sometimes when I talk to God, it's like, hey dude, what's up, dude, you know, and that's just my relationship and my understanding. Ain't got to be yours. I'm like, we're not going here anymore. And when they brought me back from dialysis, I said, take me off these pain meds. And, you know, I don't know exactly what day it was, 65 days from the time I had the accident or whatever, I don't know. But at that point, you know, I was back to what y'all had taught me. It really comes down to a fucking decision, you know. And, you know, and I struggled. I had to learn how to walk again. I had to, you know, the whole 9 yards. I had broken this pelvis before in 1990. I ran off the road and hit a fertilizer tank and woke up 6 days later in the hospital and spent 90 days in the bed. Then that was at 21 years old. Well, I was no longer 21, so it was a lot harder to, you know, and I'd go to this kinesiologist dude, straighten my spine out and all that. Well, shit's pretty good today. Now, my doctor will tell you I have chronic back pain, and I do, and this shit hurts every day. Even on good, sunshiny, warm days, it hurts. But it doesn't hurt so bad that I'm going to take that stuff they're trying to give me. You know, we take a leave one day, Advil the next day. And the reason being is because I know what I'm capable of. You know, and I know there's a lot of y'all in here that, you know, my sponsors in the 3-decade range, and Jeff's got a little bit more than that, and several others you here that have a lot of clean time, but I know there's also some newcomers here, you know, and when these people tell you, get a sponsor, work the steps, join a fucking home group, get us commitment in service, these are the things that help me to make it back time after time after time after time, because my experience being here is that failed commitments and dishonesty will get me high. Now, I have my own business. I'm the vice chair of the board of directors for this convention. So I'm running around, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. I ain't got time to talk to you, bye. You know, my wife's calling, where the hell are you at? Where did you leave my shoes? Whatever, you know. My grandson, all this stuff going on. And when I want to quit, when I want to say, you know, because I still, you know, I still get the fuckings. And, you know, going through a 4-step with a sponsee a couple, 3 weeks ago. And we get to that spot and it says in the book, do you still have any reservations? And I'm like, well, because I had a sponsee a couple years ago that, February he starts having problems with his feet. He goes to the doctor. 2.5 months later, we're burying him. He's dead, cancer. It is what it is. He's gone. He's in a better place. No more pain in this world, and there's no need to fret over it. But I automatically pulled it back up. Well, if I got lung cancer and brain cancer and I'm dying anyway, fuck, I'll get me some of that new weed they got out there, And so it's a dangerous place for me to be. And I say that here because I need to tell on myself when I have those thoughts. The only successful day I have is when I don't use, when I don't rob and steal, when I don't, place anyone else on my 9th step or a new 10th step. These are successful days for me. And so I keep enough service work, I keep enough shit going that most of the time I forget about the pain. But the pain, the physical pain that I suffer spine-wise and everything else would be nothing to the pain I would suffer if I had to go. But if, the book tells us jails, institutions, and death, the only thing they left out is what if I got stuck out there in that fucking cut for 5 years, miserable, wanting to die, that just gnawing in my gut feeling, how can you live like this? Look what you've done. I can't go back there anymore. And the only reason I can really describe that with accuracy, and that was a very small segment, but it's because of step work. It's through going through step work. It's through talking about my part in my bullshit till the day that we got here. And pain and recovery, I think for me, I was talking to somebody over the phone that's an earth person. We kind of met up. I believe it was God's will or whatever that we met up. We're doing financial business together. But I said, I'm running batshit crazy. Because it was yesterday morning, I'm getting ready to get packed up. I got to have this, got to have that. Yada. I'm still answering the phone. The wife's got a flat tire. The daughter can't get her tag. The world's coming to an end, all that shit. And y'all are coming tonight. And I said, you know what my problem is? He said, what's that? And I said, lack of spiritual maintenance. So now that I've told you why I'm suffering in pain, after the workshop, I'm going to try and do something about it. And that is pain in recovery, and it's self-induced pain. Because y'all gave me the tools. Write a gratitude list. Do something for a newcomer. Go to a meeting. Share about your bullshit. Take a service commitment. Be careful which ones you take. I've been into this for almost 10 years now. But if it wasn't for this gig right here, hell, I don't know what I'd be doing. PR would be catching hell. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, like I say, I feel very blessed to be here with these two guys. They, if I got any better friends in the rooms, I don't know who they are. I love you. Thanks for coming. I hope you have a blast. If you need anything, ask John. And, no, don't hesitate to stop me and say, hey, I need something. If I keep talking and keep walking, you realize I haven't heard you, so say, hey, stop. Anyway, thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. So you gonna introduce me, or I just gotta sit here? I'm Jeff. I'm an addict. Yeah. So John asked a couple of weeks ago. He said we have a whole bunch of slots that haven't been filled, and I said, well, he said, can you do one? And I said, well, is the Saturday night speaker thing open? I didn't really say that, but I just said, plug me in wherever you got a hole, and I'll be happy to come in. I'm glad that I did. It is an honor to sit beside these two gentlemen. They're both dedicated to service. They both love Narcotics Anonymous, and just the way they carry themselves is, it's great. It's really good. So suffering in recovery, I think that's what it says. Yeah, suffering with clean time in recovery. So I think that George brought up a very good point, and that was what life was like before recovery. And I would say that's where real suffering was a big part of my life. And, you know, I didn't come to Narcotics Anonymous for any reason other than to get off one specific drug. And that was the thing that I thought was wrong with my world. And so you guys tricked me. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I was asked to give up, including beer, you know. So I think my suffering up to that point had just gradually got worse and worse and worse. And toward the end, without getting too specific, I was circling the drain. I was going down quickly. I'd overdosed 3 times, and my health was failing. I had, just a whole bunch of negative circumstances that followed me into the rooms. So that was suffering, and that's, I want to make that point. That's my, the best day that I ever had in that period of time is not even close to the days that I have that are my toughest times in Narcotics Anonymous. And I can say that with certainty. The last probably 5 years of active addiction it was hell. It was every morning getting up, or every afternoon getting up, and just what have I got to do now? And I hated my life, and I hated everything about it. So I got into recovery, and I think recovery gave me tools to deal with what George called the self-inflicted suffering. And a lot of my suffering, when you stand back and look at it, you can see clearly, through our inability to accept personal responsibilities, we're actually creating our own problems. That was me to a T. And so I learned these things about responsibility and about asking other people when I need help, about coming to believe in something other than myself. This is all huge stuff. I think the 4th step prepared me a lot, helped me to get rid of some of the weight that I was carrying around. I was still suffering with it. So my point with all of that is just step work. Step work alleviates a lot of the unnecessary suffering, the self-inflicted suffering. But I'm going to tell you what I believe, and whether you believe it or not, that's okay. What I believe is God doesn't inflict suffering on me. I think life shows up to everybody, and that's just the way it is. Whether in recovery or not, life happens. If you know somebody, that person's going to die. It's just reality. And so pain is going to be a part of your life. I think with me, a lot of it is just the amount of attachment that I have to the pain. And I'll tell you that I've been clean for 33 years. I got clean January the 14th in 1987. Yeah, thank you. That's not why I said that, but thank you. My point is that in that period of time, I would say most of my recovery has been smooth sailing and coming to conventions, lots and lots of fun things, having relationships with people that I love and care about, the crazy stuff that we do after meetings, the meetings after the meetings, and going to a convention in Bermuda, and it was so freaking beautiful there, and the people and the warmth and the love that you feel when you get connected in Narcotics Anonymous. I've been to different states, and just you feel welcome no matter where you go. And so I got to stress that that's real important, because a lot of times you come to meetings and all you hear are people's problems and doom and gloom, this and that, and all of how shitty life is. My life has been fantastic. I've had little blips along the way where emotional things have come up that have caused a lot of pain. And I've found my solutions to those things in actually suffering, legitimate suffering. Okay, so my wife at the time, my wife and I had made a decision to have children. And part of that decision was, we'd do what you'd have to do to have babies, and nothing was working. It was, so we went to fertility doctors and specialists and all this stuff, and it just wasn't happening. Finally, she got pregnant. And so this one seemed like it was going to see it had a miscarriage before, and this looked like it was really, things were going along pretty good. We're picking out the baby's names, if it's a boy or a girl, the colors of the room and all this crap, and really attached to the idea that we're going to finally have a baby. And long story short is, at about 4 months, the baby died. And so I can't communicate to you the sadness that I experienced, and she did as well. And I'll tell you what my knee-jerk reaction, and this is what I said to her: let's get in an airplane and fly down to Key West. We lived in Miami at the time. Let's just go to Key West and forget about all of this and just, get some time away. And we're crying a lot. I mean, this is real legit pain we're going through. And she said, no, I want to go to a meeting. And I said, okay. And I'm like, that didn't seem like a good idea to me. And we went in there, and people by that time knew our struggles with having children. They were so glad for us that that she was pregnant and so forth. And I felt, and I believe she did as well, the love that this fellowship pours out. One of the things I would advise you, if you're ever in a position of consoling somebody who's gone through something like that, don't talk to them about God's will and everything, everything's going to be all right. Just hug them and tell them you love them and tell them you're sorry and that sort of thing. We don't need explanations at that point. Maybe later on, let some time pass. But so that was one of the things. And then I would say that was probably somewhere around year 8 in recovery. And the rest of the stuff is just like, I go to work, I go to meetings, I get a service commitment, I'm raising kids. By that time, we actually had 2 kids. And life started going along pretty good, and I'm just forgetting about things and really, really enjoying my life. And so this goes on 10 years, 15, 20 years, 25 years. All this has been pretty much the same way, smooth sailing. And then, at about, I think it was probably 5, 6 years ago, a bunch of things started happening, more or less in the same time period. And one that shook my world was my son, who grew up in these rooms, would come to meetings with us, he knew the steps better than I did. I mean, he'd always, he'd be the guy advising me to go to a meeting when I was losing my shit, that kind of thing. And he started with drugs, and he got, I was, thinking, my kids will never. And sure enough, there he was. And we had to make a decision. And the decision is what to do with our son. And that was probably one of the more painful things that I had to deal with. Was the decision we made was to send him away to a long-term treatment center. And I had to lie to him. And I don't lie to my son. We're on a truth level. And I lied to him just so we could get his ass on the airplane. He was rebellious at the time, and just a lot of anger and so forth. And off he went. And I'll tell you, that was one of the sadder times in my recovery, bringing him there, dropping him off. And I remember him, he ran away from the treatment center, and he's in the middle of Montana, and there's nowhere to go. So he's walking down this dirt road, and he has a stone in his hand, a big stone. And I'd pull alongside of him in the car, and he looked at me like, I'm going to kill you. And this hatred that was in his eyes. And, finally, some people came, got him. And I went to a meeting that night in Whitefish, Montana. And I sat around. In this room, there was only 6 of us. And so it went around, and I was like the 5th person to share. And I just recounted the story that I just told you guys. And the next guy to shared, he was 18 years old, and he just got out of treatment. His parents brought him there and dropped him off a couple of years ago. And he said, I'm doing fantastic now. I love being clean, and da-da-da. And that sigh of relief. But I got to tell you, before that, I'm in my hotel room, curled up, and I'm not a big crier. If you guys are, I'm no cry shame on as far as I'm concerned. It's a great thing. I was crying like a baby, and just hurting. And to have that happen, and that sequence of events that took place the way it did, it was like, okay, I have to remember there is something that I believe in, and it's God, and I need to honor that. belief and that commitment that I've made to turn my will and life over to the care of God. Well, I needed to do it with my son as well. And I'd like to tell you that story has a great happy ending, and he's got 10 years clean, and he's president of. He's not. He did come back. He stayed clean for a couple years, graduated with honors, got a brown belt in judo or something. He's happy. Good, strong kid, and he made a decision. And it's not how I would like him to run his life, but he's living okay now. He's living with his girlfriend in her parents' house, and he's working, got a decent job, and he's living his life the way he wants to live his life, without my controls. And you know what? That's okay. It is okay. It's not what I want, but it's okay. And I've surrendered to that. So while that's going on, my wife and I was living, I got to tell you, the last 5 years of a 26-year relationship, I lived in a loveless marriage, and we knew that. We both knew that, and we talked about divorce, but finally that came up and it stuck. And I had all these feelings that go along with a relationship ending. I had feelings of like betrayal because of certain things that had happened, and I also was not just dealing with the separation from a person that I had been with for 22 years, I was also dealing with a family dissolving. And that's what probably, the feelings that I was going through hurt the most, was having this little thing that I was part of the nucleus, and it's just shattering. And it was a sad place to be. And so, if that isn't bad enough, about the same time my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I went down to Florida where my parents lived and hung out there for a while. Helped, and that was what they taught us in Narcotics Anonymous. Try to help, try to be of service. And I did a lot of things to help my mom find placement for him, get insurance things figured out, and a whole bunch of other things. But one of the things that my mom had asked me to do was go to a pharmacy and get this prescription filled. And he had it's a hard narcotic, and it's used for pain. And I drove up to the place and handed the prescription, and for the first time in many, many, many years, I thought, if I just took one of these, that would probably make some of these uncomfortable feelings that I'm dealing with go away. And why they tell you to keep coming back, that applies. Sometimes the addict who still suffers that they talk about in Tradition 5 is not the newcomer. Sometimes it's us old timers. And I can tell you, at that point in time, I would believe I was the suffering addict. I got a good friend, his name is Jimmy N., and I picked up my phone, and I called him, and he answered, and I sat and I told him exactly what was going on. And he sat and he talked with me for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And that conversation with another recovering addict took the monkey off my back, and that's what I needed. I needed connection. I needed connection with another person, and I got it. And that helped me. It helped me through that little period. And my dad finally passed away, and there's some stories in there that were funny. Some of them were extremely sad. He was tied down with restraints because he was, could harm himself or others, and I was one of the others. And he was getting violent, and he finally yelled. He said, "Let me up! I got to go to the bathroom." And so finally we get out there. I cut off the restraints and stuff, and there's a nurse that's trying to help and stuff that's at the house, and he says, "Never mind, it's too late. I shit in my pants." So we bring him to the bathroom, and he's trying to cut the diapers off of him, and he won't stop moving and squirming and stuff. And finally I said, "Dad, hold still, I'm going to cut your dick off." And it was with a pair of scissors. I was trying to get his diapers off. But for maybe 3 seconds, he looks up at me, and then he started laughing. And so that was in that huge storm, there was just this little quiet moment where the kind of the sunlight of the Spirit shone through from him to me. And I got like his little Godsmack where you get those goosebumps and stuff, and it was touching. So anyway, I go back to Georgia, and he passed away shortly thereafter, and then my dog dies. And I tell you what, all these things are happening. One of the things that affected me more than anything else, and maybe it was just built up stuff, and that was the thing but that was my dog died. It's like, damn, you know. And again, I cried with my son. I didn't cry much about the divorce. I didn't cry much about my dad passing, although I loved him, and I loved my ex-wife. When that dog died, I was boo-hoo and crying and carrying on, and I think, you know, one of the things that the guy who sponsors me is this old Yoda dude. His name is Chet, and he's a wise man. And I talked with him periodically when all of these things were going on, and his advice it's like we tell the newcomers. His advice to me was, well, maybe you ought to double up on your meetings now. And I did that. I still take his suggestions. If he gives me a suggestion, it's usually for my well-being. And I know this man, and I love this man, and he knows. So anyways, I did what he said. I did what he had suggested, which was to double up on meetings. He said that, you know, this is a good time for prayer. And I did. And I believe my connection with God is going to help me through the suffering portion of my program. And my God will do a whole lot more than that, because like I said, most of my life has been pretty smooth sailing. I believe that God has a lot to do with that. I also believe that my connection to the fellowship, that is super, super important. If I'm not connected and any one of those things happen, that could be the thing that puts me over the edge. If I feel connected and so forth, and feeling the love of the fellowship and the connection with these guys and so forth, you know, this is wonderful stuff. And now let's take it back. With all of that stuff in mind, what my life was like before recovery. That guy who was sitting in a little room, you know, and I shared this. I went to a nooner meeting today, and I shared about taking that pipe and throwing it against the wall and saying, I swear to God, I'll never do this shit again. Only to wake up in the morning, not only not having any dope, but also needing to buy paraphernalia. And I said, you know, that was true suffering, because with the stuff that I think that I've suffered through in Narcotics Anonymous clean, I've always felt there's a way out. This is going to end. It'll pass. When I was in that phase of active addiction, I didn't know there was a way out. And that suffering seemed like it's an eternal sentence that I'm sentenced to. And so, you know, my life is pretty much back to normal again. We got divorced. My kids are well on their way. I told you about my son with his job. My daughter is 23 years old, just announced that she's going to have our second grandchild. And she's doing things, well, I had little to do with it. But anyway, it's
thank God.
That relationship that had ended, I met somebody else. If I'd stayed stuck where I was, I would have never met Lauren, who's here tonight. And the joy that brings to my life is, you know, it's almost indescribable. Those of you who have experienced true love, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who haven't, I suggest that you work toward that goal. And I think that I've talked long enough, so I'm going to turn this meeting over to you guys, or whatever we do now. Thank you. Thank you.